Hey everybody, welcome to Narrative Live. I'm Shalev on a historic day, and I'm joined by one of my favorite, smartest people on Twitter in all the world, Dr. Dena Grayson. How are you, Dr. Dena? I can call you Dena, right?
My goodness, after that introduction, I'm doing great, Zev. Thanks so much for having me. It's
It,
wonderful to be here.
it's great to have you here. Today was, we use the words historic pretty easily in our world because so much history has happened. But today was historic. I mean, I think we saw the first live televised event, a hearing at least, which actually seemed to indicate the president has committed something criminal in plain sight and he's conspired with a bunch of people. And we're going to break it down today because you're one of the first people on Twitter today to point out that the whistleblower complaint was out, and we're going to break that down today. So, your overall thoughts? What was the big thing of the day?
Oh, well, goodness, I think the release of the whistleblower
Mm,
complaint, but first of all, I think you're right. It is a historic day. Unfortunately, with Donald Trump, it seems that almost every single day is historically bad and
right.
terrible. But I think today really, I think should give every American a lot of hope in many ways. I think many of us know that Mr. Trump and his cabal have been, as I like to say, merrily treasoning ever since he took office, certainly before he took office. But now we have a just very damning whistleblower complaint that is, look, the inspector general, this is Trump's handpicked inspector general. This is not some left winger. He can't claim it's some, Adam Schiff or anybody like this. This is Trump's own guy who found the whistleblower complaint to be serious and credible and urgent.
Hmm.
Urgent meaning that Congress had to be notified by law. That is utterly damning for Mr. Trump. And the details in that whistleblower complaint, as I know we're going to talk about, are even worse for not
And
only Mr. Trump, but some of his co conspirators.
and let's do that. Let's go through it today. Starting block is all about the details. And there was a bunch of things today that caught my eye, and we broke it down in five easy to understand steps because really it was quite clear. I think we have a design today, and there must be some sort of design around today. They did it pretty well because there were five clear things that happened, and the first was the hearing this morning, McGuire testifying, and basically the headline from there that you had to take away was that Trump misused the power of his office. Did you get a chance to watch the whole thing this morning?
I did get a chance to watch the hearing, and there's no doubt that Mr. Trump, this is yet another example, I should say, of Trump abusing the power of his office. We certainly saw that previously, as Mr. Mueller outlined in his report, with several cases of witness intimidation. We now have numerous media reports that Mr. Trump was actually leveraging this relationship with the Ukrainians in a way to try to dig up dirt so that he could pardon Paul Manafort of all people. I mean,
Oh, really?
how many time convicted felon? Yes.
Wow. You know what I find so interesting as well today, as well, was the fact that we sort of, if the Mueller report was hard to follow, it was 2 years of investigation and a lot of detail, twists and turns, and then got sort of inconclusive at the end. But today was like the Mueller report on ADD. You had the whole thing in one day. You got complaint to almost a conviction today, and it's interesting that you bring up Manafort because, of course, it's the same storyline. It's the same cast of characters as Rachel
Same.
Maddow said the other
Same.
day, and it's the same set of events. It's interfering, asking a foreign power to interfere on behalf of one politician in an election. Only this time the difference is he was using the state's power because it was it's taxpayer money that was going to the Ukrainians to help them fight the Russians, and he's using taxpayer money,
$391 million.
yeah,
dollars.
to so he
$391
could
million.
stay in
So
power. Go ahead.
yeah, well, so Zev, I think that the Mueller report, I probably characterize that a little differently, but it was complex legalese and very dense. I did read the Mueller report cover to cover, as I'm sure you did, and a lot
A
of
couple of times.
your viewers, our viewers here, right? But I think the difference with the Mueller report, a couple of things. First of all, it was a much more complex conspiracy.
Mhm.
Trump sort of was insulated with the people around him.
Good
And
point.
also, this was a counterintelligence investigation. And so what was in that report, I think what is much more interesting is what's not in the report, as what, which is typical in a counterintelligence investigation, which is, yes, there's wrongdoing, but are actual charges brought? It's one of the frustrations that I know a lot of our friends and colleagues in the intelligence community share. But in today's case with a whistleblower complaint, this is a very direct link. And anyone who reads that transcript, and I've spoken with some former federal prosecutors, and one of them said to me, bluntly said, Dena, I've listened to countless wiretaps of mobsters extorting people. And quite frankly, they were much more subtle than Mr. Trump.
Right. It did seem like a shakedown.
That's very telling.
It was. It
reads like a shakedown. One. It was one. It is a shakedown. Deb.
Yeah, it is a shakedown. You're right. It absolutely is. I'm really wondering if there is a tape. Did you hear Richard Painter today on I think MSNBC?
Oh, there are tapes.
Oh, I can't wait to hear them. Because there's one thing about a shakedown that you read
there are tapes.
And a shakedown that you hear. The tone is going to make all the difference. So I'm interested to see what they come up with.
That's right.
Speaking of shakedowns,
especially that part, right? One quick thing there, Zeb, is that part when, of course, you have the president of Ukraine asking specifically about the defense aid, the military aid, and then Trump's like, "Yeah, but you got to do me a favor, though." I mean, it's very clear. If you want the money.
Everyone around him said that they wouldn't even take the call unless he was willing to talk about Biden. I mean, that Trump was not willing to talk to Zelensky at all. If Biden wasn't on the table, which is outrageous. Speaking of, I was going to use the words mobsters. You might not agree with me, but shakedowns at least. Let's go to Rudy Giuliani. Now, clearly from what we're reading in this whistleblower complaint, and from what he's saying today, because he's being outrageous in the comments he's making everywhere today, it seems to me that this guy is caught in a conspiracy that is going to be very hard for him to get out of. I mean, I just don't see, he looks like he broke the law just as much.
Well, it certainly does look that like Mr. Giuliani, good old Rudy, was serving as the bag man and cavorting around the world. He had some secret meeting in Madrid, apparently, which was revealed by this whistleblower, meeting with Zelensky, some of his aides, Zelensky being the president of Ukraine, to specifically discuss what was needed, from Ukraine so they could basically get the cash. This is a global shakedown. And this is sir, I'm not an attorney, so I'll leave that to the attorneys, but certainly multiple attorneys have said publicly that these are crimes. And regardless of that, it's clearly highly, highly unethical to shake down a foreign leader for your own personal benefit. And especially after, Mr. Trump can't claim that he didn't know getting something of value from a foreign government for an election is illegal when his own son, Don Jr., did this. And the only reason Don Jr. didn't get charged by Mr. Mueller was because he was too stupid, they said, to be charged. Well, Don Jr. is too stupid to know that this was a crime. Well, Mr. Trump doesn't have that excuse, although we certainly know that he doesn't care. Well, he doesn't care. He told George Stephanopoulos a couple months ago on national television that, of course I take dirt on an opponent from a foreign government. After everything, of course, he just doesn't care.
And that's, you had a sequence of events there, which is just going to read so easily to viewers, because you've got the Mueller report, which basically said, don't do this again, and his press statement was pretty clear. He said, the most important thing to take away from this, Mueller at least, was said that Russia has been attacking us and we need to stop that. And we can't have this kind of a corruption of our election. And then just go right into doing it again. And with the same people.
Well, it's the same people, but actually you back up, it's really the same thing. Remember, we never talked to the Russians, never met with any Russians. Right. Then, we talked with Russia, but there was no collusion. Right. Then it was, we colluded, but it's not a crime. Right. Well, the same thing happened in this circumstance. He said, I never mentioned Biden. I never mentioned Biden to him. He said that. I never said anything about Biden. Not only did he, but we had several people around him. Then we had this bizarre circumstance where after the phone call, right, you have Vice President Pence was supposed to go to before the phone call. Before the phone call, Vice President Pence was supposed to lead a delegation going to the inauguration of the for the new Ukrainian president. Right. And at the last minute, Trump said, cancel the trip, and sent Rick Perry and report, according to this whistleblower, members of that delegation were there to transmit that message that, you better play ball on Biden, you better play ball on the DNC server, you better play ball on Manafort if you want the cash.
It's always
So
the
who
same,
was
all these
part of that
people that
cabal?
land up in his group, in his circle, they land up getting caught up in criminality, and they surprised afterwards. It's always shocking to me. This is funny today. Rudy Giuliani, this is to Atlantic. I don't know if you saw this a while. It's maybe 2 or 3 hours ago. It was posted. He thinks the country should be happy that he uncovered this. That he's the guy who uncovered this. He goes on to say, "It's impossible that the whistleblower is a hero and I'm not. And I will be the hero. These morons, when this is over, I will be the hero." And, he was once a hero. I don't think people really
Yeah,
think of him as that anymore.
that's insanity. That's like saying, calling the bank robber who says, "Oh, here's the cash we stole.
Right.
I'm a hero because see, I recovered the cash." I mean,
Yeah.
that's insanity. That
It,
that literally is just absolutely nuts.
it's a great
But
analogy, and
that's
he thinks,
logic.
but he
That's
thinks like that.
logic in the MAGA crowd.
Look, he has been
Well, they
committing
all think
crimes
about
and
that.
getting away with it for so long that he must think that he's untouchable. So
Acid.
his view of the world is the view that matters. But it's not the case, and not the case certainly since the Trump administration took power. Now, this is the third thing. We should move on because the White House also did this incredible thing where they decided to actually conceal the transcript. So the call happens. I guess a bunch of people figured out, oops, we did something wrong. So we're going to hide the transcript by saving it into a special computer that is actually
A
offline.
secret server.
Yeah, a secret server that's offline. It's not really
A
connected to the
secret
rest of the
server.
world.
This
Yeah.
sounds familiar.
Yeah, right. Thank
This
you.
sounds
Right.
familiar.
Alpha Bank,
Hillary
anyone?
Clinton has got to be
Yeah.
just sitting there sipping her tea, just going, "Oh, a secret server,
Yeah,
huh?
really interesting.
Oh,
In your
who would have
basement?
thought about it?"
And so,
Yeah, total
and this
total
is,
irony.
except that this one was for confidential information only, for top secret, confidential code word information only. And the White House has now decided that this is the place to secure transcripts they don't want to show the world, which are criminal or potentially criminal. It blows
Well,
your mind away.
look, but it's not just this transcript. And I
Right.
think that to me is the real, sort of bombshell there. I think we found out where
That's true.
the transcripts of the Trump Putin calls are. And I will bet you that they're on the same server.
Right.
So this is going to be, I think, a very big world of hurt for Mr. Trump because the Democrats are going to go hard after the White House to get those records. And frankly, if you go back and look in history, this is where having an impeachment inquiry is so helpful for the Democrats because that gives them much more investigative power, and the courts respect that. So if you go back to the Nixon case where he tried to hide the smoking gun tape, well, that was a unanimous ruling by the Supreme Court. So there is unanimous precedent that Congress should be able to get that information. And if I'm sitting in Nancy Pelosi, Speaker Pelosi's shoes, Adam Schiff's shoes, Chairman Nadler's shoes, et cetera, I think that they're going to go after not just the Ukraine gate transcript, but also what about the Helsinki translator transcript?
Mhm.
What happened to that? What happened to her notes? What happened to the transcript of all of Trump's calls with Putin, including right around the time he had a call with the president of Ukraine, which is in the same period that the whistleblower was mentioning. So
Right.
I think
It's
that's part
interesting.
of it.
And that's a
And then
very
Zev,
good
another
point. It's worth
point.
underlining that what you're basically saying is this could be a treasure trove of information where they have hidden all these secrets and it could
Pull
come
the
out.
string, pull the string.
Right. Wow, it's
And
incredible.
correct. I think the other thing you pointed out, Devin, if I could just add quickly, is that this was a conspiracy
Mm-hmm.
to cover up the evidence, and it was clear that multiple officials were involved in this, and that senior White House officials specifically directed this activity. They directed a quote unquote lockdown.
Right.
That is a cover up.
It is.
That
That's
is,
a, that's a
and again, the
conspiracy,
cover up
and
being worse than the crime. This is bad.
a lot of people could get impeached from this. I mean, certainly there's a lineup of cabinet ministers who decided to join in this little game. Maybe even the vice president himself. I don't know what that means for succession, although wouldn't that be interesting?
They're at a minimum witnesses.
Yeah,
They're at a minimum witnesses
yes,
to this.
and they might have other information if they want to cooperate. Speaking of which, my favorite character of the moment. Yes, sorry.
Yes.
Go ahead. You want to get something?
Well, we're probably going to say that. Go ahead. I bet we're going to say the same character.
I'm going to say
Go
Bill
ahead. I
Barr.
think we're-
I think this is.
Oh, God,
I think he
no.
rises
Ugh,
to
barf.
I think he rises to obstruction here because he basically has killed the investigation before it even got going, and it may be a criminal investigation. What are your thoughts on Mr. What is it? I think William Safire in 1980 or 90 I can't remember, in one of Bill Barr's previous incarnations, he called him the cover-up general because of his role in what he did with Iran-Contra. And he's still doing the same thing today for whoever's in power.
That,
What are your thoughts on him?
well, yeah, God, he's as corrupt they come. I think Mr. Trump's biggest regret is not bringing in Bill Barr in the first place. I mean, look, say what you will about Jefferson Beauregard Sessions, but the guy's not a traitor, and he tried to follow the law. Whereas Mr. Barr is going to push the envelope. He is leveraging the power of the attorney general to go after Trump's enemies, perceived or real. And the idea that this whistleblower complaint was referred to DOJ is just ridiculous. You have Bill Barr, who's mentioned in the opening paragraph.
It's a good point you're
opening
making.
paragraph. And why was Bill Barr involved? That is, he absolutely should have been recused. DOJ should not have been involved. This is not what they do. And Chairman Schiff brought that up today during the hearing. This should have gone immediately to Congress. Congress has oversight. There's a law that, even the Senate Republicans, my God, they voted unanimously, turn over the whistleblower complaint.
That's right. And Bill Barr also is
very, very telling.
In that original phone call with Zelensky, Trump is saying, talk to my guy, Bill Barr, who'll sort this out.
Talk to my guy.
With your prosecutor. So he's definitely conflicted. He's also killed the investigation. That could be an act of obstruction of justice. The other person, who seems to have gotten caught up in this, Maguire himself, it seems like he gave the president a heads up. Let's take a look at this clip and then talk about it afterwards.
Sir, did you speak personally to the President of the United States at any time about this complaint?
Congressman, once again, I am the president.
The audio is a bit quiet on that, so I'm going to just dip in there. But basically, he does. He says he doesn't say it. He dodges the question a million times. But essentially, he gave the president a heads up about what should have been a very confidential matter. I mean, the president is being investigated. There's a whistleblower involved. Any number of things could have happened to the whistleblower during that time. There could have been any number of attempts to kill this investigation. It seems like Bill Barr did try to kill the investigation. Why is, it's again.
He did kill it.
Yeah.
He killed it.
Yeah. So
he killed it. He said, he said, right. Bill Barr said basically that we couldn't value what the Ukrainians would give Mr. Trump by digging up dirt on his political rival.
Well, that's because it's $390 million.
That's because it's priceless.
Yeah.
Right. $391 million, but the dirt would have been priceless.
Yeah.
Exactly, Zeb. But, so it's very clear that Bill Barr came in and shut this down. I mean, that we didn't find enough evidence. Come on. Just like he did with the Mueller investigation. And one wonders what happened with all of those ancillary investigations that sprung out of the dozen or so criminal cases that came out of the Mueller Trump-Russia investigation. What happened with those? Right. Did Bill Barr, was he able to shut all of those down?
I think he probably did.
Now, honestly, so Zev, I got to tell you something. I find one of the most fascinating characters in all this, who I can't even believe I'm saying this, is John Bolton, the stash, because it's going to be very interesting. What did he know?
Right.
When did he know it? He had these differences with Mr. Trump. Was he aware of anything? Could he end up being sort of the, John Dean, forgive me for even saying this, but
could be, right.
Could he be the John Dean type? Could he be clearly he doesn't appear to be the whistleblower because the New York Times just outed that this whistleblower is a CIA agent, apparently officer, I should say.
We shouldn't talk anymore about that. I just find that wrong.
But it's completely horrible.
Yeah.
It was clearly a leak from the White House, and to me, puts that person's life in jeopardy.
Yeah. It's a mistake
not to mention the President of the United States threatening to, basically kill this person, the whistleblower.
That is the next point I wanted to get to, and we'll go back to John Bolton afterwards, because I think that's kind of inspired where you're going. John Bolton is an axe to grind. But the fifth thing today that happened, which was just unbelievable, because it was a life cycle of a story. Normally it would have taken months for this to happen. It happened all in a day.
Basically, that person never saw the report, never saw the call, and he never saw the call, heard something, and decided that he or she, whoever the hell it is, sort of like almost a spy. I want to know who's the person that gave the whistleblower, who's the person that gave the whistleblower the information, because that's close to a spy. You know what we used to do in the old days when we were smart, right? The spies and treasons. We used to handle it a little differently than we do now.
kind of an uncomfortable laugh at the end there, but it's shocking that he said that because it's, I mean, if the phone call to Zelensky sounded like a shakedown, this sounded just like a plain old threat from the mafia. It really does. It does. I mean, to be able to
Yeah,
suggest,
it's like he's putting a hit. He's putting a hit
basically
out on him. I mean, it's, oh, he's a rat, so we're going to put out a hit on him. I mean,
exactly what it reads
this
like.
is a patriotic American who, quite honestly, Zev, I think that, we've been predicting this, and really, frankly, I've been hoping for this for a long time, that at some point, we knew that Mr. Trump was not going to change his, what I view to be treasonous behavior, that he's going to continue to be merrily treasoning, committing crimes. That's not going to change, because that's his MO. And as you said earlier about Rudy Giuliani, I mean, Mr. Trump has literally been getting away with it for his whole life.
Yes.
So he wasn't going to change what he was doing. In fact, he's become more brazen. And the fact that he thought he could get away with this, that call, I'm certain and confident, was recorded, and not just by us, not just by the Ukrainians. I'm sure many people were listening into the call that Mr. Trump had with the Ukrainian president. And he's brazen about it. And now he's threatening to, death to the person that actually listened to this. I mean, it was a matter of time when finally Mr. Trump would forget, hey, it's one thing to do this around, Don Jr., his daughter, Kremlin Barbie, Ivanka. I mean, of course, this is the way dad operates. So whatever, right? Or Bill Barr, who
it's also one thing to do it
clearly
before,
is in the president's corner.
But to do it now,
right.
I mean, after, it's too much. It's too much for anyone to understand. And as I said to you, whoever put it together today, whoever was able to figure out that they needed to condense the timeline so these guys would not have a chance to respond, was very, very smart. It was one of those, it was a lot in a day, but if you needed to know the storyline in a day, it all happened today. So it leads you to ask the question about what's next, because we've got an impeachment inquiry happening, although today's evidence looks pretty damning. You maybe don't need that much of inquiry. The number of Democrats in the House in favor of an inquiry or impeachment itself is over the 218 limits. So we're about 220, 225, somewhere around that much. So we're at that point now where impeachment could happen. The Senate's a whole different story. Of course, the trial would have to happen in the Senate, and that's a tricky territory. Although I was really surprised. When Mitch the other day, yesterday, maybe it's good, the time's going so fast, was like, release the transcripts. Of course, let's see it. Why did Mitch do that? And does it indicate that there is a bit of a turn in the Senate?
Well, no, there's not a turn in the Senate. Mitch McConnell is the master political operator, and he knew that the truth was going to come out. So they got wind that it was, quote unquote, really, really bad. And it was obvious that the details, drip, 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 were going to come out. The Washington Post obviously has a very good source and was, a deep throat kind of source that was leaking this information, essentially kind of like, hello, you better release it because the truth is going to come out. So I think this is what's called getting out in front of a very bad story, because the day before, Mitch McConnell said, oh, no, this is just Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats trying to make something political out of nothing. It's all this political nonsense. And then the very next day, we had unanimous consent. Right. Unanimous consent
right.
from Republicans and Democrats in the Senate who can't. Well, they can't even agree that they like chocolate, but they agreed that this whistleblower complaint should be turned over to Congress. So that is what happened there. Now, with respect to impeachment, in a trial, so it all comes down to personal. Look, there's some of the Republicans that are complicit, the Devin Nunes's of this world, Mr. Hoppen and Uber, but most of them are just cowards and they don't want to lose their jobs. So right now we have to look at the public polling. So when impeachment proceedings started against Nixon, he was polling in the mid 60%. Right. Okay, so it took about a year, and where his polling came down to where Trump sits, which is sort of the mid to upper 40%. Then when the smoking gun tape came out, where Nixon was clearly conspiring to cover up the break-in at the Watergate Hotel, that's when Mr. Nixon's, it's easy to confuse the two, when Nixon's polling plummeted in the toilet to 25%. Right. So what that means is he was about at that 50% watermark within Republicans. That's what it's going to take for Republicans to get on board. They have to know, and Mitch McConnell has to know, you know what, not only could I lose the majority in the Senate? I could lose my job because Mitch McConnell is up for re-election,
True.
as are a bunch of his cronies. So it really depends on what we uncover, what the Democrats uncover in their impeachment hearing. So I think we're going to see.
In Nixon as well, wasn't it? It took a re-election. It took an election to get him to get to the impeachment process. So we might see that same develop here. It's the impeachment itself can happen afterwards. I hope not too.
I really hope not, because
Yeah.
I really hope that that Mr. Trump is resoundingly voted out of office. We shall see. And certainly public sentiment on impeachment has shifted dramatically. So there was just a poll released today. I believe it was an NBC Marist poll that's showing that that 48% of Americans support impeaching Mr. Trump, up from 38% in April.
Wow.
So, I don't think people have been polling this. Now, I do expect that this will be polled daily, weekly, whatever, from here on out, now that we actually have a formal, finally, impeachment inquiry underway in the House.
Well, that's a good place to wrap it up. I also think there's a lot of people calling lawyers today at the White House and in various offices in Washington, because everyone's going to need to lawyer up. This is going to start getting very, very expensive and very complicated, and a lot of people have been caught in this net. It is, in my opinion, a conspiracy, and it's a serious one. It could lead to the impeachment. Dena Grayson, thank you so much for joining me today. That was fun. I had a good time with you. Thank you.
That was awesome, Zev. Thanks so much. I hope we do this again soon, and keep up the great work. It was really good to join you. Thanks.
Absolutely. You too. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Well, thank you for joining us on Narativ. Bye-bye.